everything coast to coast with your hosts, Buddy Sotello and Evan Ginzburgh. This week, I have the honor of introducing my guest, who is, when I was thinking about introducing you, I was thinking, if you were going to a pro wrestling match in the 2000s in Northern California, there was only a guarantee that you would have a good show if about 5 different talents were on the card. One would be like Christopher Daniels. One would have been Mike Modest. Another one would have been maybe Donovan Morgan. A third one may have been the West Side Players. And the fifth one would have been you guys, you and your brother, the Ballards.
Thank you.
You always entertained so well with your matches. And some of the best matches that I saw in the 2000s involved you guys. You guys against maybe the West Side Players. You guys against, remember when I had you faced against Super Destroyer and Boom Boom Kamini?
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, that was a good.
That was a great match. That was really well booked. You worked so well with Boom Boom to make just a fabulous entrance and really great finish on that one. I really loved that match. And so so you and your brother helped really define the tag team scene of the 2000s in both Los Angeles and in Northern California. And so I wanted to introduce you to Evan Ginzburgh because I think you two should definitely get to know each other. So welcome to our show. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Hello, Evan. How are you?
How are you? Good.
So one of the things that I wanted to say, first of all, is why didn't you warn me at all how much work it was to raise twins? Because you and your brother are a pair of identical twins. And man, my twins have, Evan can account for this, have ridden me into the ground on a number of occasions. So you were one of the first pair of twins that I really got to know well. So you should have warned me it was coming. But
we were the perfect twins, that's why. So
yes.
Yeah.
So tell me about how working with your twin brother is both like maybe a blessing and maybe a curse, because I know how my twins operate, and I'd be interested to hear your take on that.
It's with both of us. I mean, we're both very passionate, and we both have ideas, and I guess I'm a little bit more open to his ideas, more opposed to how he's not as open with my ideas. But there's times we'll both meet together and we'll both come together and we'll work out pretty good. But there's times, with twins, as you'll soon learn more growing up, is that when you have that clash, it's just one turns their back and the other one turns their back, and then eventually you turn around and hug. But so we've been able to work together. I mean, we've been doing it for 22 years now. So so you have to have a good working relationship with that person, whether it be a family member, a twin brother, or even a best friend. I mean, you still have to be able to intertwine with that person and be able to put up with them on the road and just all the different things that you go through, the injuries and the training, and to be able to push each other. So, and we're always very good with that. So that was one of the things that really benefited us both, is we were both very good at pushing each other to reach new heights.
Wow. Well, I mean, so how did you and your brother first decide that wrestling was going to be for you guys?
We were older when we started. We didn't start till we were almost 28. And it was just one of those things. We just said, we'll give it a try. We tried everything. We played hockey up until we were 25. And then after we stopped playing hockey, we kind of needed something a little bit more violent to fill that gap that we had, So, and it was very odd from 25 to when we started, of not having something competitive to do and not having something where that's bigger than you are, so you have to learn it and adapt to it. So then we just had an opportunity, tried out, contacted a promoter and said, hey, could we try out? And he said, sure. He gave us had us sit down, and we just did our stuff in the ring, and he just kind of nodded, shook our hands after, and said, let's look up. So we thought, well, hey, at least we tried. We always told we're probably not big enough to be pro wrestlers. We're too old to start, that sort of thing. So it just was one of those things where once we actually trained, he called us back like the next day and said, "I'm so impressed with you guys. I'll train you for free as long as you guys are willing to put up the ring and take it down."
Wow.
And, that's where that came from.
Your connection's a little light. I don't know if you can get a little closer to the microphone, perhaps, if that's all right. Sorry about that.
No. Is that better?
Yeah, that's a little bit better. You were just cutting off a little bit. I just wanted to make sure that our audience can hear you. So you've actually had a WWF tryout, haven't you?
Multiple times, yes. We were actually with developmental for a while. We were with VPW, which was developmental. So every time WWE was in town, we were either doing a dark match, doing the training, or doing some sort of extra work. We were always sent down there. And then same with when we had the Wednesday shows, as you probably remember those, they'd always send somebody down there, whether it was JR or Tom Pritchard. Somebody was always in attendance looking at you. So it was kind of strange. It's like when you go down there, I mean, of course, as a child growing up loving wrestling, I mean, that's your dream. But when you get down there, it's like you walk on. The first time I wasn't, because I was just walking around on the cloud. But then the next time, when you realize, okay, this is our opportunity to get signed, you walk on eggshells. And here's a good example. Like, let's say you walk into a room, it's just you and Triple H, right? He's on the telephone. He's got a call. He looks and he sees you. Do you go up and shake his hand and walk out of the room, or do you just set your stuff down and leave? Because either way, you can get heat for that. He could say, "Oh, that guy, he's so arrogant, he didn't even have the nerve to come up and shake my hand." Or if you do shake his hand, he could go, "Wow, that guy was, what nerve, I was on an important business call and he interrupted it to shake my hand." So you walk around in eggshells there. At least back then, it was that sort of premise, where you're always nervous being there.
Well, given the latest announcement from Vince McMahon, I think people are even more nervous about hanging out around. I don't know if you heard the latest where he said that nobody can talk on any media or anything like that unless it's approved by Vince McMahon himself. Basically, it's some crazy stuff going on out there. But tell me more. Now, first of all, I loved the hockey goon gimmick. Just you guys pulled it off so fantastically. People really because you played hockey, obviously. Yeah. So that
Slapshot. I don't know, but Evan.
Yeah, I've seen Slapshot. Paul Newman.
Fantastic movie. So yeah, we've idolized that movie ever since we were kids, and we had already had the jerseys, and we thought that was one of the things we thought, well, why not mix hockey and wrestling? Because we saw how failed Goon was, when WWE had the Goon and he was on the skates, and it just didn't work out. But we thought, well, what if there was a different take on that? And I mean, who doesn't love the Hanson brothers? We're gonna call ourselves the Hanson brothers, but at the time the Bop Hansons were popular, so we people to confuse the two, so we stuck with the Ballards.
So why don't you, the laundry list of the greats that you have been in the ring with, especially guys who've gone on and done some amazing stuff, what would be, in your opinion, your favorite match that you've had with?
I'd say the Hardys, because this was back when they were WWE champs. So, it was, it was definitely a test for us, because they're at the time were the hottest team in the world. And for us to be able to compete with them was pretty, and to be right there with them punch for punch was really good. Road Warriors is another one. And I'd say the Bushwhackers was also a very important one for us, because the first time we wrestled the Bushwhackers and we were able to have a really good match with them. We've wrestled them, I would say, legitimately over 100 times. And,
wow.
Every single time. So, it's better that way. But it's just one of those things where, you really, being able to work with guys that were at that level really, boosted us and showed us, hey, yeah, we could work with it with anybody. Let's see, Jimmy Snuka was another one that was, just the guys that you idolized growing up, to be in the ring with them and do matches with them was, and it was incredible. Especially the Road Warrior. I'd say the two we missed out on was the Rock and Roll Express and the Midnight Express. Those were the those would be like our dream matches would be against those guys.
So Evan, I'm gonna let you have a word in edgewise. Why don't you have if you have a question for our guest?
I grew up on the Twin Devils out of L.A. at the Olympic Auditorium. We used to get the L.A. TV tapings here in New York. And what's the best way to utilize a twin tag team? What's the best way to maximize that?
Well, I'd say like what we always do is whether it works for us or against us, especially for the finish, is, brother A takes, big finishing move. There's some sort of ref distraction, which is, why we always had a valet with us. Other one sneaks in the ring, rolls him out, and then either it works or it backfires on you. So, like one of the things that we did recently that was pretty fun, it was actually the last match I did because I got hurt on that match, was I had cut my hair and my brother's hair was still long. So we utilized that in the match to where I did that to him and I rolled him out and I rolled in his place, and they saw that I was the one with the short hair. So of course then they realized it, so they reversed the roll up on me or whatever they did to beat me. So I thought it worked really well. Oh wait, no, my apologies. They actually threw my brother back in the ring while I was still laying there selling it, and then they pinned him. So because they said that was the wrong twin that was outside.
So it sounds like you had a lot of fun and you achieved a lot of dreams, especially working with so many legends. But looking back, is there anything you would have done differently? Maybe as far as the networking or whatever the case may be?
A very good question. I would say one of the things is market ourselves better. I mean, when I look back, people that I see from the 2000s, like a good example would be the Sheik. Do you know who the Sheik is? Right now, he was Joseph's his real name. He's out of Florida, and he was in I forgot what they're called, some stock market tag team, and they were back in Florida. And he moved to California, and we went on a show with them, and he had told me, he goes, wow, he goes, everybody thought you guys were going to be the next big thing. You guys were everywhere. He goes, I heard of you guys. He goes, and like he said, pretty much everywhere he went, somebody would always ask about us. So we didn't really market ourselves as well as we could have. I mean, we could have been just like, we went a lot of places. I mean, don't get me wrong, but I mean, we could have been, we could have probably been, every weekend in a different locale. If we marketed ourselves a little better. And also, I think also with WWE, I think we could have, everyone's a little shy, at certain points. I think that we could have got ourselves in the ring more, and just made ourselves more noticeable to them during the workouts. But a lot of times, of course, if there was the certain wrestlers there, they would focus on, so they'd be in the ring with them. If it was a guy that was like 6'7", 300 pounds, I mean, they'd be showing the guy how to lock up, and while we're just waiting outside going, okay, when's our shot, so those are the things I think that I would have done different. But I really like that. That's a very good question. It makes you really look back and think, about what you could have done differently back then to create more success.
What do you consider some of the highlights of your career? What are you proudest of?
Going to Japan, England, doing a tour of like Korea, Guam, Japan and Hawaii. It was like a month of wrestling. I mean, I've never been so sore in my life. That was an accomplishment. But I would definitely say Japan. Doing a pay-per-view in Japan was definitely our number one thing. And then number two would have been WWE doing a dark match, because it was in San Jose in front of about 17,000 people. And it was just wonderful, just being out there. That was us achieving our childhood dream. And it's one of those things that people will always say, well, those guys didn't make it. But I mean, I think that's all, making it is all in the individuals, because everybody should set goals. And if you accomplish your goals, I mean, then you've achieved, you've made yourself if you've accomplished your goals. And that was our biggest goal, was to perform in front of a WWE audience. Whether or not we got signed or not was irrelevant at that point. So that, to me, that was our biggest goal that we had accomplished.
And looking back, I mean, why didn't they sign you? Do you have any,
My guess would have been size. I mean, multiple times back when it was TNA, like they wanted to bring us into Booster Tag Division like 3 different times. But like WWE was really high on us because they wanted to compete with WCW, and they wanted to have a cruiserweight tag division. But then, of course, they bought WCW, so they didn't need that anymore. So they, because they had enough cruiserweights, they probably didn't know what to do with. So I think that this was the thing that really, pushed them off on us, because we, both teams that we wrestled Jimmy Snuka's son was in one of the matches with Tyson Tomko. They both got. Tyson Tomko was already signed at the time, but Snuka got signed that night, and then we wrestled Hardcore Kid and Justin Sane, and then they both got signed after that, after the dark match we had. So we did a very good job of putting our opponents over, but I mean, going for us, we didn't get that same, I think they looked at us more as the enhancement type guys, that they couldn't focus or do something with us.
I'm telling you, if there were younger versions of you and your brother, you would be in AEW right now. You would have gotten a shot at AEW. AEW was just sort of like, you were in, the WWE and WWF had taken over everything and was really keeping, the smaller guys from getting a real break. But if AEW had been around at that time, I bet you would have been signed by
That would be very nice. Actually, ECW was very interested in us back when with Nova. He said if ECW stuck around, because we would have been in there too. But because he really liked us, that was the reason he came to UPW, was because he wanted to have a match with him and Becky Kazarian against us. And so he was very high on us, and that was like another. Well, like, we've been one of those teams that have just had so many different missed opportunities. Like, even in Japan, there was like a lot of politics that affected that. So that was one of the things that kept us from returning to Japan on a regular basis.
UPW, you just put your finger on it. That was something I really wanted to talk to you about. Tell us about your experience in UPW, and particularly working with Bassman and the other talent that was in there, which includes, Daniel Bryan and John Cena.
Oh wow, yeah, to us it was a great experience. I mean, it was we were training a lot of the guys too, so there was a little bit of a, sometimes it was a little disheartening that you train somebody and then in a few months they've got, they've accomplished more with WWE than you had, because they had the size. But yeah, I thought it was great the way they ran things. I mean, they were doing TV tapings. They're getting every Wednesday, once a month, they're having shows in a bigger, with lights and being filmed. So it really prepared you for television. And I mean, I really thought there's a lot of guys there that seeing like John Cena's success is really like heartwarming, because that guy, a little story about John Cena is we got him booked as a Patriot against who was it? Greg Valentine on one show. And so we went out there, and this is John Cena. He barely worked. He didn't work anything outside of UPW at that time, and we thought he had talent, so we wanted to like help him work with other people. So when we got him out there, and he did the show, and there was some kid in the hospital that couldn't go because he was sick, and it was late at night. It was probably like 1 o'clock in the morning. So, but of course, John Cena's like, "Where's he at? I'm gonna go say hi to him." And we all went to the hospital together, and just the way he was, you could see all the stuff he does is genuine. I mean, he was like that way before he had any success. I mean, he'd go visit a sick kid. He'd do whatever he could to put a smile on someone's face. So I mean, he was always very genuine with that.
Yeah. I find it ironic that a lot of the fans hate John Cena when he's like the nicest guy going, legit. They also have it in for Roman Reigns. What do you think of the whole psychology? They push these guys too hard, so the fans hate them. I mean, I don't get it.
Well, I think if it doesn't fit their mold, if they weren't from the same, like, when they see those guys, fans don't think they deserve it, because, John Cena's got a very simple moveset that he's generally, he has not changed that since UPW. I mean, his stuff isn't really, it could look a little sloppy at times, but he knows when to do this.
Yeah.
He's that, and that's one thing when he actually came down, shows the type of good guy he is. He came down when we were teaching people and was just in town for a day and decided to show up in the training facility just to give the kids their encouragement. And that's what he told one guy. There's this guy named Ryan, really talented, could do every flip, every move. And he told me, he goes, you're way more skilled than I am. He goes, you're way more athletic, you're way more gifted. He goes, but I know when to do this. And that's why, so he was basically saying that, and he's very good with the crowd. He's been around for so long. I mean, he is definitely, a Hall of Famer, and a lot of people won't give him or Roman Reigns credit because they don't fit the mold that they want to see for a pro wrestler, which I think is very unfair.
Yeah,
we did on the indies with PWG is a good example. When with PWG, we did a lot of psychology, and we were basically the heels that we tried to play heels, but they wanted to see more of a Japanese style where everyone was getting dropped on their heads. And because of that, the fans genuinely didn't like us. Not didn't like us as heels, but just didn't think that we were exciting wrestlers who didn't fit that mold. So of course, a few people say something bad on the website, and then the offices think, okay, well, we got to get rid of this guy because they're hated. I mean, 87% of the people could have liked us, and the 13% that didn't were the 13 that posted on websites and message boards that said, oh, those guys are terrible, so people will always listen to that. They'll listen to the 13% on something like that.
Wow. We've had conversations about those very people on this show, so it's certainly, a pet peeve of both Evan and mine. But, I was just thinking about that whole group of you guys, just from Samoa Joe to Frankie Kazarian to Cena to Looney Lane to you guys, that whole, because you were part of that UPW invasion of APW. And that was, to me, when you'd want to talk about like a bucket list type thing, that was great. When you guys came up and fought in Vallejo, and we got to meet Cena, and we got to meet Samoa, and we got to meet Frankie Kazarian and all that folk. And you guys were great. You guys were really great guests, and you were sort of the link between that Southern California connection and UPW and Northern California.
Oh, yeah. One of the things that I thought that both they could drop the ball on that one is we were both UPW tag champs and APW tag champs. And I really thought, and I pushed this, but nobody listened, they should have done an angle about us which side we're going to take. Because we were, we could have gone either way there. We were with UPW and APW, but they just kind of ignored us and kind of threw us in, and didn't even throw us into the mix in that, So I really thought that was kind of like where they dropped the ball with that.
That's, really, there were certainly weird booking things going on at that time, especially, I think, Jason Dedrich and all the situation that was going on with him and cheerleader Melissa and their own relationship that was going on, in real life. In fact, can you tell me about your working relationship with cheerleader Melissa, and what it was like to work with her as a valet you're gonna find a list.
Oh wow, yeah, she was amazing. We always knew good things were happening, with her because she was just way ahead of her game. I mean, she was more talented than most of the guys we're in the ring with. Probably more talented than we were, to tell you the truth. So with her, I mean, it was one of those things where just working with her, she would always pick things up. I mean, she was one of the ones that had that knowledge. I mean, we worked with many valets over the years, and then but she was one that was never out of position. She always knew where to go, and she would even improvise on certain things, and she would just know. She was one of those ones that we knew that it was just a matter of time before she got to Japan and became a star, because I remember her first show. It was in New Mexico, and I remember her crying before the show and even after the show because she was just so nervous, and she thought that she was going to do really bad and she was going to let us down. And we were like, no, just go out there and be you. I think it was up against Lexi Fife. And then after that one match, we saw how much talent she had in the ring, and we knew it was only a matter of time before she stopped valeting and started breaking out on her own.
Well, that's one thing I also wanted to mention is that I have always felt you and your brother had one of the most positive attitudes that I've ever met in life. I mean, you guys performed your guts out when there were 50 people in the audience and we were in friggin' Angels Camp or in Victorville or the middle of literally nowhere, California, and you still would put on as tough a show and as great a show in front of that audience as you would in front of the 17,000 people that you performed in front of San Jose. And I don't know, what does it take to do that? What does it take to have that within you?
Oh, thank you. Well, it's you owe it to yourself and to your opponents. I mean, I've seen that so many times. People are like, oh, crowd small, not doing this, not doing that. But I mean, no matter what, we don't care if there's 2 people in there or 2,000. We're going to do the same match because we owe that to ourselves. I mean, because when you think, well, you're a professional athlete, you don't know those 2 people that are in there could be the future John Cena and future Roman Reigns. I mean, they're watching you, they see you perform your heart out. They're going to want to see that, because people can notice. I mean, a lot of fans are smarter now, so they could tell when people are phoning it in. And so that's one of the things that, thank you for the compliment. Is that we've never phoned anything in because we've always, we've always owed it to not only to ourselves but to our opponents to be able to give them and the crowd, regardless of how big or small it is, what they would want to see.
But it's hard. I mean, you go out there and you want to get hyped for a match. I mean, this just is me as a manager, but it's got to be even harder when you're putting your body on the line and you don't see that. I mean, especially because you're used to performing in front of, or at least at times, bigger crowds. And so how do you find it within you to just get that energy to get psyched up?
Well, to be honest, if you don't have that energy in front of 2 people, you're not going to have that energy in front of 20,000. So, I mean, it's something that it would be like in practice. I mean, even when you practice things, if you go all out, if you're always doing things to the best of your ability, when nobody's watching, imagine what it's going to be like when somebody is. So, I mean, we've always tried to hold that philosophy of, no matter what, always give it your all, regardless of who's watching. Because I've done shows before, like APW, for instance, and there's been people from Utah that booked us on shows because they remember seeing us and they liked what we did. And this would be 10 years down the road where they're like, yeah, I remember I was at that show and APW and Santa Maria and you guys were there and you guys were, I was your favorite, you were my favorite match because they remember some of the things we did. So I'd be like, wow, okay. So those are the things that, I try to hold that pride, we try to hold that pride to say that you owe, if you don't do a good job, that you should feel bad inside, like, wow, I could have gave it more. So, I mean, we've always had that, not even in wrestling, but throughout our life in hockey and every other sport that we played, to always try to push.
Having been through everything you've been through, the good, the bad, the ugly, the highlights, the disappointments, if your niece or nephew or son or daughter, I don't really know your family, came to you and said, Shane, I want to be a wrestler, what would you say to them?
Well, actually, my daughter did try to wrestle, but she was very shy and nervous, so she didn't really pick it up. But because she's 29 now, so yeah, it's she tried it for a little while. I know my nephew is definitely going to want to try to do it. He actually has performed some matches with my brother when he did some shows, like the midget shows that they've had. And he would go out there as, the surprise opponent, and the guy would go out there, and my brother would, of course, attack his opponent. So he's actually performed. So I think he'll go out there. I mean, we'd be there to help him, for sure. We'd be able to give them advice. And I mean, I think it's a business, especially now with all the different movements that's growing, that in the future, I find it'll be safer for everybody. Because, I mean, with anything, there's always a lot of bullying that you see. I mean, these are things that are commonplace anywhere. And I mean, I think nowadays with all the different movements, things are stopping that. Things are helping preventing a lot of hazing and things that where people would be like, nah, I don't want to do any more shows because, they're treating me a certain way. I think a lot of that's going to start going away in the future. So I think it's going to become a safer place for everybody. I mean, of course, you worry about anybody getting injured or anything like that, putting their body on the line. But it's just one of those things where if they had the passion and desire, yeah, I would tell them go for it.
And I would say this, when I knew you guys were in the locker room, I always knew there was somebody I could really hang with and have a great conversation with. You always contributed to a really positive locker room, and it seemed like that was something that was really important to you guys was that, that no matter what, and even if the show wasn't going well, that the locker room at least would be, cool, and that people would be, not feeding on each other, because sometimes when a show's bad, and then somebody has a move that doesn't go right or is out of place, then people will take their frustration out of that bad show out into the locker room, right? They'll be mad, they'll go backstage, and then they'll, bash the locker, close, and say, "You blew a spot, you did this," and you guys never did that. And I know, and I even remember you guys breaking up a couple fights that were going on in the back when stuff like that was happening. So you guys were always on the right side on stuff like that, and I think it really shows. That's why everyone loved to have you on their shows when they knew you were going to be booked at APW. So that's another positive thing I wanted to say. Now, I also wanted to get some of your thoughts on like working with Roland Alexander, because that's another. It was kind of interesting. There was it's a 20-year anniversary, right, of when Beyond the Mat came out.
Oh yeah, it was Roland. He was, I found him to be a wonderful person. A lot of people, you either loved him or hated him. He had that, sort of for him. But we've always loved him, and he was always, he brought us in, he gave us a chance. I mean, he was very opinionated, but that was fine. I mean, he told a lot of people what they should know. He didn't sugarcoat it. If he thought somebody wasn't training hard enough, he thought if somebody wasn't doing something right, he let them know, and he had no problem telling them like right to their face or in front of everybody. I mean, I think he just wanted people to get better. And yeah, I have very fond memories of Roland Alexander. I mean, every time we went to eat with him, it was always a pleasure. He always, his saying was, "Do you want to eat right or do you want to eat good?" So that, because he meant like, do you want to eat, bad or do you want to eat healthy? That was his way of saying it. So so yeah, he was very fond memories of Roland.
Yeah, I mean, he had a lot of people around him, but he didn't have a lot of friends. Yeah. And that was maybe the one thing that was kind of tragic about him. I mean, he was both a nice guy and a mean guy, and I think he had a great fear of letting people get too close to him. And because he'd been burned by so many people. And he also was a guy that cared a lot about his own level of power and how he was perceived. And that whole Noah thing that fell apart, and then the fracture to Pro Wrestling Iron, which you sided with the Pro Wrestling Iron folks.
Yeah, I mean, there was like unfortunately, the controversy for that was that, Shannon was dating cheerleader Melissa, and I think Jason Dedrich was very interested in her, so he was doing his best to push us away from the shows because he wanted to separate the two of them. So I mean, that Pro Wrestling Iron had asked us to do a show, and same with at the time BTW was not was BTW. So like us doing BTW and Pro Wrestling Iron was nothing against Roland. We've always had positive things about Roland. I think
the casual viewer is not going to understand any of this. You gotta go to the basics.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, but it's a question that's been on my mind, and people do know who cheerleader Melissa is. So I do hope maybe they can follow with that. But I have no idea what you guys both said just now. All right. Well, sorry if it's too inside.
Yeah.
But I have found it to be an interesting question, at least for me. I've always wanted to know about how the Pro Wrestling Iron company broke off from All Pro Wrestling and people that were, kind of involved in all that. And I hope people know by now about All Pro Wrestling. After all, it was in the movie Beyond the Mat. So, anyway, getting back to maybe something a little bit more mainstream, which is that I wanted to know the difference between Southern California wrestling and Northern California, and what you felt there was maybe a difference in style and approach of why Southern California was the way it was in the 2000s versus Northern California in the way it was in the 2000s?
I think SoCal had a lot of promotions there that were really pushing to be more Japanese oriented. Whereas, and they also had UPW, which is, a major player. And at the time, Northern California had some good ones, BTW and APW. But I think the difference between that is they wanted to be more of a strong style. It was, and also a mix of that and ECW at the time. So I think the difference between the two is just that at the time, SoCal had a lot more, a lot more notice than Northern California because of UPW being on the map. And also they had XPW there as well. That was really getting a lot of press. So Southern California had the bigger press than Northern California. And I think that was the main difference. Is that more people knew when you thought of California promotions, you thought of Southern California promotions as opposed to the Northern California ones.
So another question that I wanted to ask was, how did that all differ from your experience in Japan and maybe wrestling in other countries? The type of style that you wrestled here versus what you would wrestle in Guam or, say, in Japan?
Yeah, you definitely have to adapt in Japan. It's a different style. I mean, it's not as much heel face. Just the transitions are a lot different. So for us, it was more, when we were there, it was more of a spot fest. And because it was a spot fest, it made it to where, things get sloppy if you do a spot fest. And I think that was, Japan at the time, the league that we're in, people were geared more towards, Dragon's Gate and trying to emulate that. So, I mean, it was just, you have to be in a lot better shape. Older. So that affected us a little bit more.
Who are some of the tag teams that have influenced you?
Oh, for sure, Midnight Express would be the top one. I mean, are the guys that we've always appreciated, and, like, patterned our style off of. Road Warrior, Rock and Roll Express. A lot of those guys are the ones that were, that we grew up watching. So it was really, for us, those were the main guys that were focused.
I'm attending wrestling almost 50 years. I think the Midnight Express were the greatest tag team I ever saw.
I agree. Those guys are, that never a bad show with those guys. They could make anyone look good.
Yeah.
And when you what was your favorite moment working for APW? Did you have any moment that stands out for you when you were working for, in the time that we were working together? Is there one thing that stood out for you?
There. That we won it on multiple occasions, but when we won it, I mean, it was out of the blue. No one expected that. Wrestling players to have like this long run, and when we beat them, it just shocked everybody. And to me, that was my favorite moment. And I apologize. I probably have like 4 minutes of juice. I'm actually out at a venue right now, so I have like 4 minutes of juice probably left. So if it cuts out, I didn't hang up on you guys.
Oh, no. Well, then if we have 4 minutes left, there's one definite thing I just wanted to cover, and that is Mark Smith, man.
Wow.
I think you still miss him as much as I do. I know you worked a lot with him, and just wanted to get your thoughts on Mark Smith while we have a moment.
Just a wonderful human being. I mean, very intimidating if you didn't know him, but just a real sweetheart. One of those guys that you could talk to and have like a serious conversation. No matter what he'd tell you as it was, and he'd try to get you to improve. And like, he was actually nervous in the ring with us. I mean, we should have been nervous in there with him, but he was really nervous. Just because when I asked him, he said, "Well, I haven't been in the ring with guys with talent before." And I'm thinking, well, yeah, the West Side Players, all those guys are good, but he was just nervous. But he just always stood out as, he was always a great guy to us. No matter when we saw him, he always, had a smile on his face. He was always easy going, easy to talk to. And, I would see that guy probably being able to get being a big player in WWE, or if he was around for AEW, he'd be big in there too. He could have been a big star anywhere, as he was with Noah. He could have been big in one of the big leagues there as well.
Think about him a lot, actually. and I really miss him. Hey, I really appreciate you being able to be on the call today. I'm sorry that you're running out of juice, but we'll hopefully be able to get you again sometime in the near future.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure and a privilege.
Thank you, Shane. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being on the show. We'll talk to you again soon.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So now it's just you and I. I guess we have a few minutes if you want to fill in the a gap here and say just what's on your mind. Wrestling-wise.
I was very excited to see that Andrew Yang actually called out Vince McMahon. He said he's a longtime wrestling fan, and he feels the wrestlers have not been treated well, and he spoke out against McMahon, saying, I want everybody off of Cameo and all these. At what point is enough enough? A lot of these wrestlers are struggling. Let them make a few extra bucks,
And how do you explain the logic of treating them as independent contractors and then say, but I can control, basically your speech and who you talk to, even when you're not, showing up there and wrestling a match. Vince wants his cake to have his cake and eat it too. He wants to treat them as if their only rights happen when they're actually in the ring wrestling itself. And as soon as they leave, as soon as that 5 minutes is over, they're under the complete control of Vince McMahon, but he doesn't want to pay them for any of that time.
I mean, I understand if you're a billion-dollar company and publicly traded, you wouldn't want somebody to say something homophobic, racist, anti-Semitic, xenophobic, etc. That I understand. But to make a few extra bucks, doing a cameo, happy birthday or whatever, come on,
Yeah, and saying what types of places they can go and restricting their content, and saying that you can't even access these services and everything that you say has to be approved by Vince McMahon pretty much. It's so Orwellian that, it really reminds you of like what big business really would be like if it truly had its way and ran everything. We've got enough trouble with Trump as it is, as an example of what that's like. But if you have, I would think working for Vince McMahon would be like the worst thing in the world. It would just be so difficult because he's such a megalomaniac.
Unless you're on the good list. As an educator, you have principals who have the good list and the bad list. If you're the Undertaker or Randy Orton or whoever the case may be, you'll always be treated like gold. And then the other guys, will release 36 of you mid-pandemic.
No, we've talked to enough people that have been involved in the WWE now that have talked about like being terrified in certain moments, just like what Shane was saying, that like you can't reach out and give a handshake to somebody if they're on the phone, and if you don't, then they think, oh, well, he's big timing me and he's just sitting in the room, not saying anything to me. Well, who does he think he is? He's so important, he doesn't have to say hi to me. Or, do you interrupt him and then have him say, how dare he, interrupt my phone call?
Well, what I found interesting was Mick Foley publicly said, I disagree with what Vince is doing. And, Mick occasionally comes back and has a payday. And by speaking out, you don't know if that'll upset the hierarchy. But Mick thought it was important enough to say this is wrong. And, what I find interesting after decades of, doing various media, the tide is shifting a little. It always used to be, WWE's my religion, Vince is my hero, but it's shifting now. There's a lot of people.
Not with everybody. Not with everybody. Yeah. There's certain exceptions.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is
in Long Island.
Yeah. What I'm saying is, I I'm seeing more and more people are being outspoken critics of, this independent contractor fiasco. Andrew Yang is no slouch. This guy ran for president. I mean,
and remember, they were all classified as essential employees. So it's like Vince gets them listed as essential employees, yet they're still independent contractors, and yet they still have to, obey his rules on like not having any conversations that aren't approved by the WWE, pretty much. It is truly that having the cake, eating it too, being, buttering both sides of your own bread, and then not having to worry about any consequences. And I mean, it's I think that disgusts a lot of people. It's just something that is so unfair, and you don't hear those same stories from AEW, and you don't really hear those stories from other businesses. It's not like Vince McMahon isn't just a business and isn't held. I mean, if Ford did this, if Apple did this, would people be like willing to tolerate it? I don't think so. And in California, the passage of Assembly Bill 5 could change all of this. Even during the times that Vince performs in California, if he decides to perform in California after, something like this. So.
Well, again, you have to tell the viewers what is Passage 5.
Assembly Bill 5 turns people from it was passed against Uber and Lyft mostly to turn most of those people that are considered independent contractors into employees. Okay. It basically reclassifies them and cuts away a lot of the exceptions that keep people as independent contractors, and it's supposed to give them benefits and so forth, but it's been difficult to say at best, and it's been paused from being enforced, while of course it's going to be in the courts probably until my kids are probably in college. But
what I found interesting recently, I saw an interview with Ray Apollo, Doink, and he said straight out, he said, I was wrestling 300 days a year for them. Of course I should have gotten benefits. Of course, basically he was saying everything we were saying. To be an independent contractor when you're working for somebody 300 days a year, you deserve benefits. And it is what it is.
The irony is that it wouldn't cost that much for Vince to do that overall. I mean, other businesses managed to do it. And then, two, is that by using the collective power of his largeness of his corporation, he could get these wrestlers better rates and better insurance than they're able to get as independent contractors. It's sort of, that's the other side of it, that by being selfish like this and by twisting everybody's arms and keeping everybody as independent contractors, they're not able to get better insurance and negotiate better rates. And of course, we've seen how it worked out for Jesse Ventura when he tried this, and he's been pariahed from the WWE ever since. But I don't think Jesse Ventura misses being affiliated with Vince McMahon by any stretch of the imagination. So
he's done well subsequently, but a lot of ex-wrestlers haven't. And it's interesting. Andrew Yang sounded like us. He's like, I love these guys as a kid, and I want to see them doing well when the glory is over. And I was reading his various tweets on it today, and I was pleasantly surprised because this is somebody that has some juice. And, when HBO and other people are speaking out on this, it's not just, the hardcore fans or media such as ourselves. It's, it's getting out there. It's really getting out there, and hopefully at some point it'll take root and there'll be some changes.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's when you look at the grand scheme of things, you'd say, well, it's just wrestling. It doesn't really affect that many people. But I think when you look on the larger issue of the how you treat people as independent contractors and how you treat them, or how do you treat them as employees, that line is one that is being battled in so many different businesses. And that's why I think that the WWE situation is a microcosm of a larger issue that is, how do you classify people? When do you cross that line from just being independent contractors, because basically that helps the big business cut costs, versus when they're really employees, because they're working 300 days and they have no ability to just use any service that they, any social media that they want, and that they can't, make an appearance at somebody's birthday party for a few bucks or whatever. The WWE owns their name and their likeness and all these other things on top of them, and they have no freedom, yet they're still considered independent contractors. I think that's the part that people want to see defined, because it's not just that business, but a lot of other businesses as well.
What I find interesting is, we're coming from this humanistic point of view, help the worker, but there's still that percentage of fans who, WWE is my religion, Vince is my hero, and any criticism, they rage against you. They just rage against you. And, a lot of these guys, the misconception is somebody's on TV, they're quote unquote rich. And it doesn't work like that. We've said it before. There's guys on NXT making 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 grand. And this may not sound like a bad living to the average person, but it's not a windfall. And at any given moment, as we saw mid-pandemic, it can end. It can end on a whim. Creative has nothing for you. Well, isn't it creative's job to have something for you? I mean, what am I missing there? You have talented people with charisma and all the skills needed to be signed. Isn't it up to creative, the ironically named creative, to find something that works? And I go back to, I'm sitting in Madison Square Garden 20 or so years ago, and you have Steve Austin as the ringmaster in like the second match, and nobody cared. And boom, next thing you know, he's the biggest star in the world as Stone Cold. So you have the skills and the talent. It's up to creative to figure it out. Or, take, like your friend Shane was saying, you shouldn't have to walk on eggshells with management. Why can't a wrestler who's sacrificing his body say, Vince, please, can I have a few minutes of your time? Triple H, I have this idea, and I'm not saying that never happens, but you hear enough guys say, I was wasted there. I was wasted there.
Yeah, and I'm sure, Gallows and Anderson probably would be the first people.
Gallows and Anderson. I'm going to tell this story quickly again. I'm at Madison Square Garden, okay? And I rarely go, but I was at this card. Gallows and Anderson comes out. They sing a song with Elias and never come back to wrestle. It's like, as a fan who knows how great these guys are, you want to put a gun to your head. That's frustrating.
It's very frustrating, and yet, they have so much time to work with, and instead they really squander it on a lot of, promos that go nowhere, that, you see coming like a train, 50 miles away, and you're just like waiting for it to end so you can actually get to some action. And then, as we said, when they do deliver the action, they cut it with commercials left and right and diagonal. I do remember that when I was younger, that you could see a whole match without a commercial going on in between it,
And I mentioned recently when I was in Korea, they still do that. They'll have a lot of commercials before and after the match, but they'll show the match in its entirety because they're thinking about the enjoyment of the viewer. as opposed to the commercials are more important than the wrestling.
Yeah, no, and we're unfortunately with the latest announcement from Vince, I think we're going to be seeing more commercials, even less wrestling, and his new way of promoting things always puts a chill in my spine when I think of what next from.
My 2018 resolution was to stop watching Raw and SmackDown to save those evenings because I'm not a kid anymore. Time is more valuable. I have subsequently watched, NXT takeovers, some WWE pay-per-views, but I won't sit through Raw or SmackDown anymore. It's just penance for sins I committed in previous lifetimes.
Yeah, no, and for me, with basketball coming back and baseball and all that stuff, and now football coming back, the WWE, is not going to be the only sport, visual sports entertainment on the block. So they're going to have a smaller ratings pie probably to share from, coming up very soon. So, a lot of people will be watching those things instead of watching the WWE. So, but let's watch, see where Vince goes with this. He might just totally melt down.
What you should be watching is 350 Days with Bret Hart and Superstar Graham, and Wrestling Then and Now with Nikolai Volkov and Killer Kowalski. That's what you should be watching on Amazon Prime.
Perfect plug for it. All right, well, that's pretty much the end of the program for today. Really appreciate your time, and we'll see everybody next week. So
there you go.
All right. Good night, everybody.